All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Problem Solver Politics live stream. I'm your host, Cardinellis, with Cody the Oracle.
Hey, everybody.
And I personally think, myself, that right now there's two major things happening. There's domestically a lot going on, and we're going to get into that. But today I actually am personally affected and thinking a lot about our brothers and sisters in Hong Kong. And as we have been focused on a lot of domestic affairs, what's going on with coronavirus, what's happening in Portland, what's happening with the Chipotle couple, what's happening with re-election numbers and with movies and
Warzone Season 5, dude, when that's coming out.
Yeah, and what's I've been seeing a lot of podcasts about The Last of Us 2 and so on and so forth. Okay, well, all of that is going on. We've basically seen Tiananmen Square Part 2. Except for the world wasn't watching, nor did it care. And it seemed like... What do you mean? What do you mean?
Do you remember what happened in Tiananmen Square?
Yeah, I'm saying we're seeing part 2 of that. Like we're seeing a 2020 version, but instead it's kind of like the world isn't paying attention because it's busy worrying about coronavirus. Does that make sense? I mean, the international backdraft on China for Tiananmen Square, especially with that image of the woman holding the grocery bags, was just massive.
I know, but I wasn't aware. I thought in Hong Kong it's largely been just political stuff. I mean, there's protests and a lot of we'll get into some interesting stuff, but I thought the main inroads China got into Hong Kong was just by stuffing the government, like having government changes. There wasn't, massacres of people on the streets.
Okay, yes. When I say Tiananmen Square Part 2.
So when you say that when you bring up the Chinese massacring people, you don't mean to evoke images of the Chinese massacring people? Is that what you mean?
Okay. The Chinese government taking over people who are desiring more personal freedoms. Okay? And yes, they're not marching in with tanks. This was a very shrewd political takeover. And from everything I've seen, it's just as legal as what happened to the Weimar Republic when Adolf Hitler took 100% legal power as Mein Führer. You freaking got Mao Zedong's crew taken over.
There's a lot of different reasons. Hong Kong and China are a lot different than what you. But yeah, I mean, just
totalitarian statist governments. I think there's more similarities than there's not. So I don't. Anyway, Cody, tell us what's going on in China.
Well, I thought you were going to tell us what's going on in Hong Kong. What's going on in Hong Kong?
Basically got taken over. The 10 years they were going to get, or the 20 years they were going to get, the time they were going to get as a free state was truncated precipitously by a security order basically voted upon by people friendly to China in Hong Kong. And now it's just over.
Okay, but why is it a bad sign? You said it's a bad sign. Why is it a bad sign?
I think it was a bad sign because there was kind of this belief I had felt in the international community that, and this aspiration and this hope, okay, that really we're not just going to go back to the dark. We're actually going to stay in this enlightened spot of not being communist and run by the CCP. Like somehow we're going to pull it off. And when that lease was over, yes, it went back to being China, but then, they had their protest, they had their stand, and then China was like, okay, fine, you can keep your freedoms for a while. Okay, fine, we got a 20-year breather. But then I shouldn't say 20-year breather because I can't remember what the exact amount of time was. But now even the breather was taken away. And I don't know, I feel a sense of loss over the event is what I would say. And everything I've read feels taken off guard and a sense of loss as well. It's like losing a battle in the Great War between freedom and statism, and this time statism won. That's how I feel about it. To explain myself.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right. So we can talk about other stuff if you want to. I just think that's important because...
Well, so you want to talk about some of the stuff going on in Hong Kong. I don't know. It's like, I All I know is that, they passed. The biggest thing I remember, there was protests against them passing new state security laws or national security laws, and they ended up passing them, I believe, finally in Hong Kong. The more specifics, honestly, I can't personally get into all the specifics on it. I've been staying up to date a little bit, but this was the one article that I can't. There's a couple articles I'll highlight of what's going on with Hong Kong today, but there's one thing I came across which is kind of fascinating to me. So, according to the Wall Street Journal, at least. My God, seltzer waters. Anyway, according to the Wall Street Journal, part of the new national security laws passed in China, which functionally, I believe you're trying to get to, right? What you said was essentially there was, oh my God, what was the word for it? Like one country, two states, or one nation, two states, something like that. Anyway, China basically couldn't pass national security laws that restrict on Hong Kong's ability to speak freely. Then they went and did it. So check out how severe these can be, though. So Facebook, Twitter, and Google face a free speech test in Hong Kong. Couldn't talk there. Because the new national security law means that authorities can ask companies to delete users or their content. Now, I would say deleting content is something that the U.S. government can direct social media platforms to do already. If something's supposed to be illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you pass national security laws saying dissent's illegal.
Yeah, that's true.
But what's interesting here that they mentioned, and we'll get to some of the stuff, but the idea of banning, outright deleting users. I guess you could argue that's kind of what happens when it bans, but the notion that the government can say this person's too much of an agitator, delete them from your platform. Twitter, Facebook, and Google. Because it's one thing if we were talking the other day about some of these Chinese apps and websites that are actually blocked in India because they thought they had too much influence.
Yeah.
What if you're using like WeChat or Weibo or something? If if the Chinese government wants to delete you on that, okay, that makes sense. But can the Chinese government pressure really? And we'll go through the article and see, but that sounds crazy to me, man. Outright just deleting users.
Yeah.
So they mentioned that Facebook and its Instagram service, Twitter, and YouTube, a unit of Alphabet Inc.'s Google, operate freely in the city even as they've been shut out or opted out of the mainland's tightly controlled internet, which uses the Great Firewall to censor information, which is another very interesting wrinkle and the reason why they're brought up here. Again, in China, they have a lot of their own services and apps they use for social media and stuff, like Chinese-specific. There was a Chinese-specific video game streaming platform called Panda something, I remember, because they signed a big Dota player. They want to watch them there. I mean, they have a lot of their own platforms that do very well. What made Hong Kong interesting was part of the kind of, I keep blanking on the name of it, part of the fact that they had some level of sovereignty to Hong Kong was that people who lived in Hong Kong could use all these services and they were available. But now these services are still being provided to Hong Kong, and new laws now apparently allow the government to demand they delete users. So that is crazy. They mentioned in the article, continuing, that in Hong Kong, many citizens have grown accustomed to freely using their accounts to speak out in political matters, voice support for anti-government protests, and register their anger at China's increasing sway over the city. But now the U.S. companies face a high-wire act, as analysts say. If authorities here ask them to delete user accounts or their content, refusal could invite Beijing's scrutiny and potentially put them at risk of legal action under the new national security law. Complying would alienate longtime users in the city, you think? Some of them continue to speak out on their platforms and leave the companies open to criticism from politicians in the U.S. or the U.K. Let me go through and mention some of the implications of this, but, I mean, crazy. That is a tough spot to be in, right? I mean, like, people are using those services in Hong Kong, and right now the laws say the Beijing government essentially could ask them to delete users, and they would have to.
And that's almost more total control, because here in America we're so used to multiple avenues of payment. Oh my gosh, if you want to do it electronically, there's Zelle, there's Venmo, there's Apple Pay. There's 15 different versions. There's like 2 in China, and they're all state controlled.
Well, I believe you have to attach like social security number, or not like their equivalent. Like
no, it's a unique. Yeah, it's a unique identifier that basically makes it so that this account is yours and can only be yours. And if you're eliminated from their social media profiles, then you're toast. I mean, your ability to function in society is extremely hampered. Okay, just like we were worried before when we were hearing all the stories about how they were doing social credits. Remember, like if you didn't say something that was pro-government, then you got bumped down in the social credits, which that alone, just bumping you up or down in the listings, was a big enough threat to silence people. Could you imagine what complete elimination would be for these folks? So, and this is why it worries me. And NS Greeny is thinking here. He says, how close, thank you very much for the super chat, NS Greeny says, how close do you think America is to being China? We're not as far away as we think if we don't really keep basic constitutional values squeaky clean. I've mentioned this before, that there was a progressive commercial that I always love the slogan that says, we're going back to basics because the basics are good. And those basics don't matter in China. They haven't from the very beginning. And it's the abuse of those basics and the negligence of keeping those basics maintained and important in the national conversation that makes it so people like Xi Jinping can literally just do everything he does. I mean, he literally does everything bad that the head of a state can do to his own people, without anybody questioning him, any minority party opposing him, any people's movement able to assemble and organize. Like, this is why it is bad. Of the 7 out of 8 recorded millennia of human history, Asia has had the biggest GDP. And by Asia, I basically mean China and the Chinese Empire. And it wasn't until the Enlightenment happened that really the West was born and became the predominant great driving force of humanity, that gave us our technological advancements, gave us our scientific advancements, our philosophical advancements. But that won't continue forever. We're just growing up used to thinking that, oh yeah, the underdog can win and can pull it off because we watch these awesome, Hollywood movies about it and so on and so forth. But in reality, if bad guys and statists take over, it ruins countries and places and continents for tens, if not hundreds, possibly thousands of years. Okay? Because of the damage that they can do and the precedences that they can create. Look at any country that was underneath the Iron Curtain. Still hasn't recovered. Some people would say Estonia did because they went hyper-capitalist in many of their trading practices. But nowadays, would you prefer living somewhere in what was considered the Eastern Bloc over what was considered the Western Bloc?
I would live in the Baltic states, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but I even saw your eyes. You were thinking about that for your second. You're like, let me qualify that and make sure.
I would. I'd live in Latvia, dude.
Okay, if you had a dream and a business you want to get off the ground, do you think Latvia would give you a better chance? Would Elon Musk have made it in Latvia?
Maybe not, but if it's internet business, why not? I'm weird. I'll accept that I'm weird. Most people wouldn't. But I'm just saying, me personally, I actually, how would I moving there?
I've met a couple of hot Latvian chicks. That could work, and the food's not too bad. You know what I'm saying?
There's some very beautiful areas in general in that part of the world.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, well, in the macro view,
Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, very beautiful places.
You can drive through them in like 20 minutes.
No, I don't believe so. It actually is a fairly decent sized area.
Okay, well, if you look at the map, they're tiny. And yes, 20 minutes might be hyperbolic. But either way, at the end of the day, I think we are closer in some aspects than people think. Now, some of these aspects couldn't just be legislated away because they're cultural. So culturally, I think, yes, we are miles away from China still. But legislatively, I mean, we're doing a lot of creepy stuff here that our parents 20 years wouldn't believe was possible. The website the LA City set up where you get to turn in your friends for a cash reward for violating social distancing laws. And all you have to do is upload photos of different people and, quote, turn them in for a reward. I mean, that literally sounds like what the great cultural revolution, the great leap forward, what Mao Zedong did. He literally would venerate children who would tell on their parents for growing crops in their backyard. While there were people starving, the families that tried to grow crops were actually considered traitors, disbelievers in the mother country, and they were encouraged to be turned in by their children. I mean, this is like, it sounds the same, it feels the same, and that is what being Maoist is. And a lot of these groups going through, whether it's Portland, whether it's Seattle, the way they view the world and enforcement from now we're in charge, it's sheerly an element of power, no principle behind it. You know, it just, it seems like we are closer than I ever envisioned us being closer in my lifetime. And I don't like it.
Dude.
Yes. Tell me how I'm having a moan, how I'm...
You're really just giving out on this one. Man,
No.
these are like very unpopular ideas very few people hold. Evidenced by the fact that there's not that many people out there doing it.
But we're
They're
living in a
coming
world
from-
where the
you
few
but
can
you do
enforce
realize
on the many.
people in Portland, the people in Seattle, they had people coming. There was like a couple hundred people in the CHOP, right? From multiple states. I mean, like, it's not like there was a couple hundred people in like a 9-block area. It was a couple hundred people that came from out of the, like, it's realistically not that many people. They're able to use social media to make their voices seem big, but it's tiny. It's insignificant. It's like, they're doing stuff that's bad, and they should, like, the events are bad, but there's not like some big group doing anything, achieving anything.
Okay.
They mostly just make a mess, and it gets dirty, and eventually the smell makes regular people start to complain, and I'm not even kidding you. It's generally what happens. And then they just come and get rid of it. I mean, it's not like there is this sense of, like, you know what, man, if a couple hundred people are going to come somewhere and just throw a tantrum and people are going to complain at us, okay, we'll just let them do this for a few days eventually. And what do you know? Eventually the mayor had somebody threaten her in Seattle, for example, and someone does something. It's not like sometimes these things let to go, not sometimes, recently, a lot of the times they let this stuff go on way too long, but you'll notice there's always that hand, like that kind of, you know, like the leash gets pulled eventually. We're like, oh, enough. Okay. Like any day of the week, we can walk in here and get rid of this. We're like, it's these people. The fact that there's so few people in the streets doing this stuff, to me, speaks to how insignificant it really is, because they literally exist by the benevolence of the majority. Most people just let it happen. They tolerate.
That's actually a good phrase. They exist by the benevolence of the majority.
If the average person's like, the hell they're doing this, I don't care what the police have to do, make it stop, which in some places they do. They don't even write articles about it because, like, it didn't go well. There's some parts of the country where there's enough people that feel this way in government to kind of, but it's not something sweeping over the country. I believe the media does a really good job of boosting what they want to boost and hiding what they want to hide to make things seem crazier than they are.
You don't think generally secularism and consumerism is sweeping over the country? I have seen a massive shift.
Of course it is.
I mean, we used to have movies in which pastors were the heroes that were celebrated in the film.
Okay, but okay.
And now they're the only time you're allowed to see a pastor in his movie is when he's a Blumhouse serial murderer.
I can't think of a pastor as a hero outside of a religious movie.
Well, yeah, but see, we used to have entire radio programs that were massive, like...
I agree, we don't do as much religious media anymore. Actually, we do more religious
media. I mean, think about Martin Luther
ever.
King was Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a doctorate in theology.
But we do more religious media now than ever. It's just... I was going to say quarantined, isolated. It's curated in select areas for people to watch, but it exists more now than ever.
But no, it is quarantined. Like, just be honest, it's quarantined by...
how much do you really care about? Like, would you really care about watching Jewish religious films about like Judaism and like the?
Well, actually, if they're funny, and oftentimes I do give credit for.
They're not clowns. I mean, serious dramatic films about like the Talmud or whatever. I'm not. I don't.
There's
know
actually
much
some
about
really funny Jewish cinema out there.
I'm not talking about jokes. I'm talking about, would you watch a serious dramatic film just about the Jewish faith?
Oh, if it required a cultural familiarity that I didn't have, it probably wouldn't be as fun.
Require anything. It would just be a dramatic movie.
Oh, sure. Then why not? I mean, if it's good, it's just like watching a foreign film.
I guess, but would you?
I mean, if I watch Sajad the Deus and it's good,
would you be
fine.
like?
Who cares if
would
it's a
you be like
Brazilian
enticed? I love a movie. I think it's a Catholic movie or a Christian movie called Keys to the Kingdom. I think very good movie. It's obviously a religious movie, but it's really good. I understand, but it's just those movies kind of have a market. You know what I'm saying? Like Christian movies are kind of more appealing to Christians than non-Christians. Yeah. So Jewish movies are more appealing to Jews than non-Jews. So Muslim movies, I probably am using that right tense, be more appealing to, Muslims than maybe non-Muslims. Like that's just kind of how that stuff would work, I'd have to imagine, Fiddler on the Roof is actually technically a Jewish film, isn't it? I've never seen it.
Oh, wait, you haven't seen Fiddler on the Roof?
I wasn't in. Were you in dance choir? What did they call it?
No, show choir.
Oh,
Fiddler on the Roof.
Show
that's
choir
like,
sounds way better than dance choir.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say show choir sounds a little bit more believable. Dance choir, that sounds like I don't know about that one. So, okay, cool. So I think this is significant though, Cody, because also I'm not really an interventionist, but Hong Kong was begging for help, and there was no international pressure put on China, especially not now because we're all busy trying to take care of our own.
I mean, the U.S. government's like signed a bunch of like we're not doing business with Hong Kong anymore because of it.
I know, but those measures never work, and they always end up getting reversed after.
It's a thing.
You know,
it's a thing. You said nothing.
It's something.
It's a thing.
But it's always like when the U.S. government. I've never understood this. Even as a young child, I'd never understood when I would read about some atrocity performed by some country against another. They'd be like, "Oh, well, the president got up today condemning those actions. Oh, we got a condemnation from this country who's not going to do anything to us militarily." And it's like, I don't know. This is why wars like the war in Iraq and Afghanistan bother me so badly, because we use up all of our intervention capital on countries that didn't ask for help. So much so that when there are countries that did ask for help, just like we asked for help from France, we're not available for help anymore because we wasted all of our political capital with our own people on stupid wars like the war in Iraq. Which, like,
who do we not help to?
Well, it depends on how you define help.
There we go. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a great answer. So everyone or no one, realistically.
Yeah. So Shane Olmstead says, "Love us some show choir."
Yes. Well, and
yeah.
$2 super chat from Sly Cactus said, "How are you two going to celebrate the 4th tomorrow?" What is the 4th tomorrow?
What you going to do, Cody?
For us European.
Can I guess what you're going to do?
Sure, guess.
Okay. If I know Cody, he actually has no plans to go out and do anything, but he's got a big, thick steak that he's going to let settle to room temperature and barbecue on his own.
No.
No?
No.
You have a special brew that you've got ready.
No, I'm just going to go hang out with my family. I'm going to go with my to my grandparents' house and hang out there. Hope the weather's supposedly very nice there. So I'll be sitting outside relaxing.
Sitting outside relaxing. Okay, cool. I'm actually taking my first vacation in 2 years, and I'm really excited. Actually, I wouldn't say really excited because I still even haven't had a chance to really think about it, and you have to be able to think about it to be excited. But I am looking forward to being able to sleep in for the first time in literally eons. So that's going to be pretty sick. And it's just a small beach community here. And what's funny is I have a bunch of friends that are staying at my house while I'm gone. They wanted to go on vacation. They asked if there was a place to stay. I was like, well, I'm not going to be in my house, so you can get at my house. So I'm hoping I don't come home to a destroyed home where a bunch of college students partied hardy. You know what I'm saying? While I was gone. But yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. I'm excited. So anyway, hey, let's move on. Can we talk about what's going on in Portland? Talk about what's going on at the Chipotle couple?
Nobody knows who that is.
Nobody knows who that is? Actually, I've been seeing some people in the chat talking about it. I personally think I am worried. I am worried for my countrymen because of what I think November 5th is going to look like. None of our institutions right now, Cody, and I don't know, you can call me you could say this is being cynical, but right now, none of our institutions have the credibility enough to step in and tell people, okay, let's calm down. Truly, let's get along. Okay. And both sides feel this is an existential threat. And I believe it's one side more than another, but I do recognize there's common threads on both sides of echo chamber thinking where they are just getting pure bipartisan news that is otherworldly from what happened in real life and is just pure, sheer sensationalist narrative. And I don't know. I think no matter what on November 4th, this is what's going to happen. I don't think some people are going to be able to handle it. What do you think?
Riveting, man. Riveting. Haven't heard that one before.
Okay.
You tell you what, I think the exact opposite.
Okay, what do you think?
Not the exact opposite, but I don't know what did. I think people getting stupid arguments and altercations 1,000,000 times a day in every part of the world nonstop. I think I've literally seen a video of a guy attempt to drive by on a riding mower against his next door neighbor because they don't like the fences are going up with some nonsense. Whoa. I've seen that happen, okay? Rand Paul was beat up by his next door neighbor for his fence or something. People have probably been killed by a shovel, beaten with a shovel by their next door neighbor for not trimming their tree branches, okay? So I think when I hear of stupid altercations between random people, I tend to dismiss them exclusively. Because you know what? This isn't even interesting, man. I've heard of way dumber stories. I've heard of way crazier stories.
Okay, but I think what worries some people isn't necessarily that there was a dumb altercation, but the way that it is getting presented to the media. Anybody that watches the video.
That's why I call you a mark, man. You literally respond to the media the way they tell you to. The media tells you to do something, and you go, "You got it, man. Line right up. I'm going to feel exactly how you told me to feel."
No, if I was
this random thing's being amplified to get my attention, now it's got my full undivided attention. Like, what the hell, man? When they try to distract you with this nonsense, you're supposed to look the other way. When we're talking it, by the way, love this. Listen to this headline. Tell me if this headline, you know, some of you guys might say, this does sound interesting. A racial incident involving a gun in a Chipotle parking lot goes viral and leads to arrest. What does that even mean, dude? You want to know what it means? Two people bumped into each other, got in arguments in the restaurant, and it looks like outside the restaurant, back to the car. They kept yelling at each other. The one party didn't want to let the other party leave because they were yelling at them. So the one party took guns out and pointed at the other one. And you know what happens when you take a gun out and point it at someone who isn't actually physically threatening you at the time? You get arrested. Now...
No, but she was physically threatening her.
Okay, but I'm saying... Is like,
they'd already smacked a bunch on her car.
Okay, but I'm saying like to the point of... Oh, so you know what? You're right. Feed that to a jury. Nah, you don't get it, man. You don't get it. They were slapping the windows.
They were specifically preventing her from being able to back out of her parking spot.
You're right. So you're supposed to escalate immediately a deadly force in that incident as a citizen. My most point's this, dude. That's for the courts to deal with, okay? And the fact that two people got in an argument because they bumped into each other and one pulled a gun on the other just doesn't interest me, man. I don't know. I hate to say it. I hate to say that I don't care, but I actually know. I love to say I don't care, man. People do dumb things all the time, man.
But see,
people like cut their neighbors up and eat them over the dumbest reasons. Like, it doesn't like mean anything.
Yeah. No, but it does mean something though, Cody, because you literally have an entire generation of young black men and women that think white people hate them, are looking to beat them up, are looking to pull guns on them because of just years of sensationalist garbage being put down their throat. And when you look at this headline, this is racial incident involving a gun in a Chipotle parking lot goes viral, leads to arrest. With that picture, in the entire 5 minutes of the video, you are led to think, first off, by labeling it racial incident involving a gun. By labeling it racial incident, you're supposed to be led to think that the reason why the gun was pulled and the reason why the violence was initiated was because somebody had an animus towards the other based upon their skin color. Yet when you watch the video, you are very aware that it's not animus based upon skin color. It's because there was a bunch of people who were surrounding a van of a woman who felt vulnerable with her very rotund husband.
I think it was 4 people total, correct?
If you counted the voices in the video, it was probably...
I think there was 2 parties, and both parties had 2 people. Well, dude, this is why when you always say, "Why do you call me a mark?" Dude, this is why. I read this headline, you know what I do? I read this and I go, crap. In one ear, out the other. I don't care, man. I don't care. And then you went through and you detailed every reason why it's baloney. You brought up this and that of how it's stupid, and they're just trying to make you think something. So instead of dedicating your life to an incident between 2 people at a Chipotle parking lot where nobody got hurt, and somebody got arrested and might have to plead a community service or something. I don't know these people. Maybe if I knew more about this woman, I'd say, about damn time.
No, but
I don't know who this person is.
I don't think it's fair to say that it doesn't matter, though.
It doesn't matter, dude. People kill each other for less every day in this country, and they don't write stories about it, so you don't care. Don't give into what they want, which is for you to care about this one because they wrote a story about it.
No, I'm not caring in the way they want me to care. They want me to believe.
Yes, you are.
That it wasn't.
They just want you to be angry.
I'm rejecting the lie.
They just want you to be angry. They don't care what you're angry at or why. They just want you angry because angry pushes papers.
No, they want me angry at blacks.
No,
I'm
they
not
don't.
angry at blacks.
No,
I'm
they
angry
don't.
at the media for lying about the incident.
They want you angry. They don't care if you're angry at your goddamn shoes, man. They want you angry because you'll read their paper and you'll give them ads. They don't care what at.
Okay.
They don't. They really don't. If you're mad,
I disagree with the premise that it doesn't matter, because I look at my society having been ruined by the fact that the media creates a bunch of false narratives that people slowly believe over time. And at some point, somebody has to say enough of the lies in the media, enough of the lies that are doing nothing but sow division.
Hey, it's almost like if someone keeps lying to you, you should just stop listening to them. That's what I do. I feel like, what's that classic line? Fool me once.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Fool me 90,000 times. At a certain point, it's not you're the fool for being fooled over and over again. That's how I feel, man.
Okay, so Shrek.
This is them trying to. This is the media trying to convince you that something that happened between two people that has nothing to do with you. You should feel something about. They don't care what you feel, man. They just want you to feel something because it moves what they got to move. It gets it going. It gets people talking. It starts a conversation. It's crap, man. It's all crap.
Okay, thank you very much, Shrek, for your super chat. What's interesting, it says Shrek TM. He actually got the trademark icon in there. I wonder if I've never seen that before. That's kind of cool. Anyway, it says, hey guys, Cardin rules and Cody drools. Oh,
you should let me read that one.
I haven't. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. Yeah, dude, guys rule, chicks drool, or whatever.
Right back at you, Shrek.
Right back at you, Shrek. And then Spencer for Hire says, it's called clickbait. They got you. Oh, man.
Yes,
somebody's on your team, Cody.
It is clickbait, and they did get you. And then one more, a Silver Fang $2 super chat said, media is biased. 5-minute clip down to one fake news. It's their job, man. What do you expect? Are they do you know it doesn't make money? Boring, dry news minus commentary. Doesn't make money. People have tried it. Trust me, it doesn't make money. People like commentary, like drama, like excitement. They don't just like. If this story was written as there was an altercation in a Chipotle parking lot, a gun was pulled, but nobody was hurt, no shots were fired, nothing was damaged, and instead they were arrested but they believed to be probably getting off on lighter, which is literally what happened. Nah, man, it doesn't make money. A racial incident involving gun at Chipotle, it's good SEO, Chipotle. Viral arrests. This is just SEO. Racial incident. That's good SEO. Gun. That's good SEO. Chipotle. That's good. Actually, I think gun's bad SEO for Google now.
Yeah.
Search engine optimization because Google's like no guns. Even though I found them through Google, it just they want you to talk about this stuff. It's one of the reasons why I generally don't bring this stuff up a lot because it's like two people that have gotten a fight. Like, wow, man,
No, but see, I think this fight is analogous to how things are going to go in the future. If you watch the video, it is very plain to see that the young black woman and I believe it was her mother in the video were assuming beyond what is the general fundamental attribution error that we talk about in psychology. Okay, where you assume that bad behavior that you do is based upon circumstance, while bad behavior that others do is based upon their lack of character. Okay, all of us have this basic level of bias and prejudice and foolishness and human error programmed into us. But after being brainwashed for years of irresponsible media, broadcast media especially, it is obvious that is the animus driving what these people who are harassing the woman who ultimately drew the gun, at what is perceived to be in self-defense. I mean, the number one rule legally about whether or not you can fight in states that are not stand your ground states is whether or not you had the ability to run away. And the assailants on this woman were smashing on her car, smacking on the car, causing obvious property damage, and standing behind it so she couldn't leave.
You got your what's it called? Are you allowed to practice law in that state?
Did I pass the bar in Detroit?
Yeah,
I have not. I have yet to pass the bar in Detroit.
So it seems like no one's.
I'm literate. Okay. I can read.
I just want to give everyone a history lesson. We actually named what's going on right now a long time ago. And again, I want to read through this. I'm sure some of you guys remember this from school or whatever. You probably heard it and stuff. It's a very popular term. The term is yellow journalism. What is yellow journalism? Yellow journalism and the yellow press are American terms for journalism and associated newspapers that present little or no legitimate, well-researched news, while instead using eye-catching headlines for increased sales. Replace sales with traffic. Techniques may include exaggerations of news events, scandal-mongering, or sensationalism. By extension, the term yellow journalism is used today as a prerogative to decry any journalist that treats news in an unprofessional or unethical fashion. No, that doesn't. Oh, wait, hold on. So Frank Luther Mott identified yellow journalism based on 5 characteristics. Scare headlines in huge print, often of minor news. maybe like two people getting in an argument at a Chipotle, a lavish use of pictures or imaginary drawings. Nowadays, we have just out-of-context video, I would argue, just replace that, or out-of-context images, right? Use of faked interviews, misleading headlines, pseudoscience, and a parade of false learning from so-called experts. No, that never happens today. Emphasis on full-color Sunday supplements, usually with comic strips. That would probably be more, you'd have to relate it to website design instead of physical paper. And a dramatic sympathy with the underdog against the system. It's almost like this thing that exists today actually has existed for forever. We used to have a name for it. We used to call it out. But nowadays you can't call it yellow journalism because every publication and journalist in relation to other publications and journalists is operating fundamentally the same. When yellow journalism is just journalism, which is where we're at today, everything is sensationalized. Everything is sources said, a study found. It's baloney nonsense. This isn't new. It goes back 100 years.
Yeah,
but
this
see,
stuff. The difference
200
is
years.
The difference is, though, Cody, we used to have yellow journalists and then real journalists.
That's my point. Now we don't.
Because the public demanded it. But now the New York Times is no different than the yellow journalists. We used to have a paper of record, and you could hold up a New York Times article and say, okay, the New York Times is journalism. It is subject to the ethics of journalism. It is not the Saturday Evening Post, which can say sensationalist crap, okay? So we are accepting these as journalists, these as yellow journalists. This is the real thing. This is the guilty pleasure. And yellow journalism was allowed to do its muckraking, okay, because our society knew the difference. But now there's no difference between the New York Times and yellow journalism. And that's where it gets dangerous, because before, a regular standard human being who is intelligent could use their gifts of discernment and their natural powers of intelligence in order to know the difference between that which was just crappy pulp fiction, okay, and that which was real, actual journalism.
So what do you?
But now you don't know anything. Yeah. So I actually am.
To your point,
I'm saying the public needs to demand. The public, we, the people, I hold us responsible for not demanding actual, real journalism.
How about this?
Okay, hit it.
To the point, like, would you not agree that what New York Times is, not New York Times, sorry, what ABC did, I don't know if you guys remember this, ABC was trying to sensationalize, because, I mean, I understand what yellow journalism was, the definition of it, for when Pulitzer, or what's his name, Hearst were selling papers, different era. But now we sell news through websites, and we sell them through cable TV. It's where news is sold primarily. Newspapers aren't that big a deal anymore. So ABC on their news product through TV, in order to really drum up how bad things were going on in Syria, they played footage filmed in the United States of America in the years 2017 at a gun range is just like a show. And they said, oh God, look at what's going on in Syria.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah. So like, yeah, they don't do what they used to do. They don't draw cartoons and stuff like that. No, now they'll just show you footage of an unrelated event. Who was it that kept getting busted for showing footages of someone? I think it was ABC again. They kept getting busted for showing footage of Italian hospitals, saying like, "Oh no, the hospitals are overcrowded." And it was like some of them were, but it's like, why are you showing footage from Italy instead of New York when you're talking about New York? I mean, these are journalism practices that they've been increased, they've been expanded on just what journalism is now. It's the same idea. It's
so
a lot of
how do we fight that?
I don't know. What if you can't? What if that's what journalism is? It's changed. Something new now.
I just get sick to my stomach thinking about that. That we really can't. Actually, no. I think out of the traditional avenues, they've all been corrupted. But I really think that's why it's so important. Live stream news, people like us just talking over issues before arriving at conclusions. These really new and brave journalists that just get these live stream cameras and go out into the riots and say, hey, what's going on? And I also think there's a return to listening to what the politicians actually say. Like, before somebody says, oh, Trump said something super racist, go watch his speech. When watched in context, it's not that bad. Oh, these people want to imprison all suburban Christians. Look, go watch the speech. You'll find out it actually wasn't that bad. I think there is, for many folks, a return to watching their original speech and finding out it wasn't that bad. It wasn't until actually, if you look at the history of political punditry, it all goes down to, I think it was the 1968 or the 1969, had to have been 68, convention, the DNC convention, where traditionally ABC, NBC, and CBS had all showed up, and their cameras would actually broadcast the entire convention. And it used to make people's careers if they had a really, really good speech at a convention, because that convention was just broadcast. And that's what you did. And these conventions would last like 2 or 3 days. And it was 2 or 3 days of airtime of just broadcasting these dry and boring speeches. And ABC, which didn't have a lot of money, decided, what are we going to do, man? We don't even have enough cameras and people and hourly wage that we can pay to really broadcast all of this. So they actually got Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley to talk that night about the speeches and argue about the left versus the right, and kind of be the talking head that truncated the story instead of feeding the story directly to the people. And it became like must-see TV that everybody loved, and it birthed political punditry. And it birthed the filter. It birthed broadcast media now filtering what happened through their interpretive lens first, so they could tell it to you instead of you watching it yourself. And and then Ronald Reagan getting rid of the Fairness Doctrine. You know what I'm saying? Making news more profitable and thus incentivizing more yellow journalism. I think those were the two most detrimental events. Now, granted, many people would say those two things had to happen so that what was traditional legacy broadcast media could complete its cycle of going from a movement to a business, and then from a business to a racket, so that we could move on to the next good thing. So I get that maybe, hey, we should just be going with the flow here more, but, and be more like Cody, saying it's almost like if they've lied to you this many times, maybe you should stop believing him. Who knows? Maybe that's all part of the process. Joshua Herr, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, check out the FCC Fairness Doctrine for answers on why journalism changed so much. Yeah. Are you familiar with the whole Fairness Doctrine? Well, there's been many attempts at bringing it back. I'm not talking about the modern iterations. I just skimmed through it. Here's
the general gist of it for those. I'd heard of it before. I couldn't tell you what it was until I just read it. But yeah,
I'm actually curious to see what Wikipedia says about this.
Basically, it was a policy that required that holders of broadcast licenses to both present controversial issues of public importance and to do so in a manner that was, in the FCC's view, honest, equitable, and balanced. I believe it had two basic elements. It required broadcasters to devote some of their airtime to discussing controversial matters of public interest and to air contrasting views regarding those matters. No, I can't do that, man. It's bad for money. Stations were given wide latitude as to how to provide contrasting views. Could be done through news segments, public affairs shows, or editorials.
Yeah. And also basically this also used to be a fundamental part of the FCC law, is if you were given a broadcast license and you were ABC, NBC, CBS, or Channel 15 or whatever you were, actually back then there was only 13 channels. If you were going to be one of those 13 channels that was operating on broadcast bandwidth, and you were going to be a profitable channel, not like NPR, not for profit, but if you were going to be a profitable channel, as part of your licensing's requirements, Cody, you actually had to provide a public service as 10% of your airtime. And so PSAs, the public service announcements, counted as part of that airtime, okay? But so did news. Many of these channels came out and they actually said, you want to know what? Our public service that we're going to provide to the company is 10%, to the public is 10% of our airtime on CBS is going to be the CBS Nightly News. We're actually going to have an hour and a half dedicated for free news gathering and news dissemination. And then following the FCC rules of having to present fair sides of an argument, they generally would say, okay, if we're going to talk about the A word, or if we're going to talk about taxation, or if we're going to talk about the war in, let's say, Bolivia, okay, we're going to get the Republican on, and we're also going to get the Democrat on, and then give them, quote, equal airtime. Now you could get a worse Democrat on and a better Republican on and kind of make the Republicans look good and be slightly biased, but at least they're getting equal airtime. So on paper, all things were fair. There was minor amounts of cheating that could go on, and there was definitely shows that leaned right or leaned left by who they chose. But at the end of the day, the measurable quantifier of airtime was often used so that you could say, oh, well, we gave equal airtime to both candidates on an issue, for example. Okay. And by and large, the system worked in the sense that it made it so that people were perpetually exposed to both sides of an argument simultaneously while ingesting information. But in the late 80s, a lot of these companies who previously had used news as a loss, and they actually got to a point where they started bragging about how like, oh, CBS Nightly we lose more money on our news segments than NBC does, which is a sign that we're better and less biased. It actually kind of became this strange form of bragging rights, how much money they were losing on news. But ultimately, these corporations basically said, dude, why do we have to lose money on news? Like Walter Cronkite has gotten so popular that now people are tuning in, and our news hour is doing just as good as Gunsmoke. Our news hour is doing just as good as X, Y, or Z John Wayne TV show, or, whatever sitcom is big right now. We should be able to monetize and profit off of good news. So Ronald Reagan, who came from the entertainment industry and understood the advertising business model, was convinced by people who promised they wouldn't corrupt the art of journalism, and said, look, you got to free this up and make it so that we can actually make money off of news. We promise we won't get biased. We'll put down these little requirements and we'll regulate ourselves, and just let us pull a profit. Reagan said, okay, I'll trust you guys. You're the great American broadcasters. Big mistake. Because with that came the birth of what? 100% hyperpartisan news. Now, leftists are always trying to say, that's what birthed Rush Limbaugh. If we didn't have Rush Limbaugh, the world would be okay. Well, no, just like it birthed Rush Limbaugh, it birthed MSNBC. Okay? It birthed the massive partisan narrative of the broadcast channels, NBC, ABC, CBS, all of them. Okay? It created to all of them, from the ability of Breitbart and Fox News to exist in the fashion that they do, to the ability of MSNBC and CNN to just exist the way they do. Now, the public didn't really realize what was going on. And so that's why CNN had so much trust until pretty much really the past 10 years, and especially not the past 4. And things got so bad that Donald Trump's fake news moniker actually carried weight. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm actually usually a limited government guy, but I'm also not opposed to good government. And I got to say, I've seen some very convincing arguments that if I were in power, of bringing back basic and simple regulation like the Fairness Doctrine. If it's good, if it's not broken, don't fix it. This is one of the few things where my boy Reagan, I think he kind of broke it. You know what I'm saying? And we might need to fix it. Where do I go wrong, Cody? In that whole thing, where do I go wrong?
So I don't know, man. I honestly don't know. I don't know what to. All I know is the more I read about yellow journalism, the funnier it is. You know, someone else said that yellow journalism was punctuated by using unnamed sources and self-promotion. That sounds nothing like in the entire wave of political reporting we've had for the last. Oh, you know where it was based out of? New York. Oh, weird. It's almost like we have the same morons in New York City pushing the same nonsense with the same unnamed sources for the same self-aggrandizing and self-promotion that happened 100 years ago.
Okay, do you have any sources that you trust?
No.
No, not a single one?
No, not one.
Okay, but how can you glean that? Okay, so that's interesting. How could you operate knowing that what you're actually receiving is true information if you don't have a source that you trust?
I assume
surely you don't mean there's not a single source. You probably
I assume it's all biased and slanted and lies, and I just read around and I kind of gather what I can. I'll read an article and I'll kind of be like, yeah, that sounds like crap. And I'll be like, you know what? It's weird they said maybe there's some to that. And I'll read another one and I'll be like, wow, they both said that. Maybe. I don't know. But I can read an article and just read a couple paragraphs and be like, that sounds like such crap, man. Or that's here for no reason. That has nothing to do with the story. Or they're just trying to get me to feel a certain way. I just ignore that stuff and I try to get the basic facts out of it. For example, the Chipotle couple. There was two parties. They got in an argument. One party eventually drew a gun on the other party and they were arrested. That's what happened. That is what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I got that from the couple things I read through. Bunch of nonsense in there I just ignored, but I got that. Okay, so that's why when I heard that story I was like, man, it doesn't really interest me very much. There's nothing there for me, so I just moved on.
Okay. Exo has a really interesting question. He says, what is the prescriptive answer to journalism? First off, stop calling it journalism until it starts behaving like journalism. And I hate to say this, but like many things, we have a system based upon trust. And journalism only works if we actually trust that what they're saying is even generally true. Our banking system only works if we actually trust that the money that we're trading is worth something and backed up by something. And this is why the general drift away from God, morality, and religion has been so destructive in our culture, because the ripples of an individual entering the workforce as a journalist who has not been spiritually grounded in a basic theology centered upon something bigger than him that makes him at least humble enough to realize I should probably follow rules of journalism because I'm not an all-knowing person and I probably should get 2 or 3 sources before I just type up something that I think is my opinion as fact. This is why I think the prescriptive change to journalism will actually not be regulating journalism, because you can't regulate quality into something that's objective. I think it is, subjective. I think it is, we need a return to a vigorous self-instruction on how we morally interact with each other. Would you say that's fair, Cody? I don't see any other way out of it. How would you answer that question? What is the prescriptive answer to journalism?
I mean, I don't think there is one. I mean, journalism is what it is, man. I mean, there are not regular people are too busy to spend time calling organizations, getting, sources, finding. They don't have time for that. So there's always going to be some people who are paid to do that. There always will be.
Okay.
I would say, I honestly don't know, man. It's one of those, like, sometimes something maybe isn't a problem and it's just kind of the way things are now. I mean, journalism, I think, probably was always closer to this, but we didn't know. And now people know more because information travels faster. And we know we're kind of being lied to and manipulated and BS'd. You can't make them stop. Because you know where a lot of this comes from? There's a lot of controversy, for example, in video game journalism recently. As you brought it up earlier, The Last of Us 2 got a lot of 10 out of 10 reviews. People say it's not 10 out of 10 game. It's not that.
No, it's got a 4%. I would actually double check this. It has a 4% on the people rating, 98% on the.
However,
yeah,
a lot of that comes from. There's this sense from journalists and people in media that I've gathered. I don't know if all of them feel this way, but I've definitely gathered it from a few of them, right? Where the more you, the regular person, the reader, the consumer, the person who comes to them for info, right? The more you push back and disagree, the more big brain and correct they must be as the journalist. Does that make sense? So when the journalist says this piece of media is clearly a 10 out of 10, and then they hear the stupid peasants tell them they're wrong, they're like, aha! With my superior big brain, this validates how right I was. Uh-huh. I was so right. These small brain morons can't conceive what I am. That's kind of the absurd angle of it, but I think that's what it's like with a lot of journalism. The more people yell at them and say you're lying and manipulating and smearing, the more they go, no, I'm just right. You just can't handle me being right. Arrogance is, dude, I say it all the time, man, but the arrogance of the American, but the arrogance of humans is astounding, man. It knows no bounds. People will literally do things that make no sense. They will borderline delusional because they're so arrogant. And I think that's what we see, man. I think journalists will bold-faced lie to you because they're such a moron and they're so arrogant. Like I was saying yesterday with Sam Harris.
Okay.
Smart guy. I think he's so smart he can convince himself of his own BS sometimes. And I think that's the same thing. These journalists aren't idiots, obviously. Maybe they're not that smart, though. Maybe a little bit too clever for their own good. And they convince themselves stuff that isn't true.
Yeah.
Because I've always read that's the secret to lying. If you can lie to yourself, you can lie to anyone, man, because you're not lying anymore. You're just telling people what you think is true, and that's what most people do. So, I think that's what a lot of these journalists do, man. They've lied to themselves, or they've convinced themselves of stuff that's nonsensical is true, and once they've done that, they can go out there and pound their chest and scream from the mountaintops. They're full force behind it, because they believe it. Don't know what? There's no prescription to it, I don't think. I wish there was a prescription to the arrogance of man, but there isn't, man. Eternal arrogance is what we're doomed with. But that's where I think it comes from.
Okay.
I know better. I'm the big brain journalist.
So then, let's move on to the next topic about what's going on in Portland. And I'm actually going to segue here from what you're saying. is I actually wonder, because one of the biggest problems of yellow journalism is the bastardization, shall we say, of the language, and how things that and words lose their meaning because sensationalism ends up diluting its true worth. Okay. So I think words matter, and I have respect for the spoken word. Let's analyze how would I put this? I don't think it's yellow journalism, though. And one of the biggest problems of yellow journalism is that it devalues potent terminology like insurrection. Okay. How is what's going on in Portland not an insurrection?
Well, how is it first? You have to start with how it is first.
Okay. I would say that it's different than a protest, because a tenet of protest is oftentimes, okay, we are here and this is our statement. And the purpose of a protest is to make a statement. Whereas the purpose of a military action is to do damage, or the purpose of a criminal action is to do damage, except for if it's politically motivated and criminal, that makes it military. All right. So what's going on in Portland is kind of crazy to me, because now instead of just being a bunch of young people trying to make a protest statement and therefore engaging in acts of civil disobedience, we're kind of they're in that gray area, okay, in the middle, where ultimately you can brush it under the rug as an act of civil disobedience and not an act of insurrection. It goes protest, then peaceful protest, then violent protest, and then insurrection once you start actually becoming a logistical army structure to me. Like once there starts becoming an organizing factor.
But is that going on?
Well, yeah, there's been okay, so.
Has there been rumors that's going on?
No, not rumors. Okay, so cops have stopped. Okay, they have stopped individual trucks that have been caught delivering explosives, and from what I've been reading, they've stopped individual trucks that have been delivering either devices that were indeed themselves explosive or could be end up being converted into explosive devices in a coordinated effort from one place to another, like developing a logistics supply chain, all right, in which it's no longer just individual actors going out there and making a ruckus, but actually actors that are basically perceived as from within their organization as like the front line, the resistance, the guerrilla warriors, shall we say, who are then backed up by the other fellow believers. And it goes beyond the organizational level that intuitively I feel is that of peaceful or violent protest, more into what is an organized effort that is getting refueled by a logistically organized body of people. And the way I look at the definition is this. If what is getting done in Portland were said about what my grandfather and his friends were doing to the Germans in World War II, if they were called the Polish resistance, which was classified as an insurrection, then this would be classified as an insurrection. I mean, because at some point it stops being a protest and becomes a revolutionary war. At some point it stops being an occupation and becomes an insurrection. Like how is what's happening in Portland not become an insurrection? That's what I'm wondering. I'm asking for the definitive answer using words. How is it not an insurrection?
Well, an insurrection is any armed uprising. Actually, is armed in there? It's uprising. I think just a violent uprising against an authority or government. So sure, I guess it is an insurrection. It's a pretty weak one. It's not going to get anywhere, and it's kind of meaningless. But yeah.
This runs deep, man, Cody. This runs deep.
It really doesn't, man. Like I said, it's the benevolence of the majority. They're even allowed to joke around on the streets like this, okay?
Do you think so, though?
If people didn't stand for this, they'd be gone, man. I always point to Mrs. Bowser in Washington, D.C. She marches with the protesters. But then her police come with their bikes and pull their tents down. And when they ask her why, she says tents aren't allowed in Washington, D.C. I mean, trust me, they are allowed to be doing what they're doing. They're not taking anything. They've been given what they've been given.
But the majority is obviously putting up with it in these states that have been run for 60 years.
Temporarily.
Dude, how long was the Chaz there?
A couple weeks. And then people...
Like a couple months.
No, not a couple months at all. A couple weeks. Maybe 3 weeks. And then people said, no, this is dumb. Actually, what happened is the mayor felt threatened, and she said, nope, no more. Well, and people kept getting killed and shot. So yeah, bad things happen. Not saying nothing bad's happening. I'm definitely saying these people in the streets taking over the Chaz or the Chop, or they're allowed to be there. And it's really the kindness in the hearts of others that they are even allowed to exist. So as soon as that kindness runs up, they're typically moved on.
Okay. We got a super chat here from My Melanated Scope. Thank you very much, My Melanated Scope. He says, hi, guys, with a little hand emoji, or the wave emoji. 4-hour standoff at Rushmore just finished. Push the Trump/Pence thing back a few hours. All right. See, I know Cody didn't want to talk about it because there was a lot of controversy on that. But, Cody, your thoughts, just briefly. Just your Reader's Digest version on the Mount Rushmore thing.
I honestly haven't caught up with the last 2 days. That's interesting, though. I didn't know there was something akin to like a standoff there today. But yeah, I definitely know some controversy. Not controversy, but there's definitely people that are opposed to Mike Pence and Donald Trump's there. The biggest thing, and you brought it up the other day, actually, on Moments Ago, which is really fascinating, which I understand, which basically goes back to, and I'll admit, man, you come at me with these weird like grievances of like injustices, like everyone stabbed everyone in the back, but legit land rights grievances, that's something. So apparently, but at the same time, I have to say, like I said, man, it's such a big monument that's been there so long. I feel like it's one of those things they're just going to get away with screwing people on it. But very interesting. I didn't know there was something like a standoff there. It's really interesting. I didn't know that. Very cool. And then, $2 super chat from EXO said, can rioting be justified, i.e. Hong Kong, and what is the line, I'm assuming is what you're asking. Can rioting be justified? Sure. Everything can be justified. I'm serious. Like, everything can be justified. So sure, it can be. What would the line be? Honestly, man, like here's the thing, right? That's why I love talking about looking back to the French Revolution.
Okay.
The French Revolution was all about overthrowing tyrants. So what was it? Liberty, equality, fraternity. Yeah, it was all about. Yeah. And I think the actual one ends with like or death or like something like that. But it was all for good stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
But then where's the line? It's hard to explain like literally, but the line tends to be in the French Revolution. They started to find where the line was, where things started to get bad. Rounding up and executing people generally is always the line. As soon as you have taken some modicum of power, and with that you have rounded people up to execute them. With some kangaroo court, I would say that's generally when the lines the line's been crossed then. Because dude, if you're fighting the good fight, you're rising up, you're fighting against tyranny, a lot of stuff will kind of be justified, so to speak. But I think even in that, the line comes there.
Yeah.
We were talking about it before. Why are there Confederate monuments in the United States? Why was every single Confederate not brought to a giant hole, shot, and buried? And why didn't we burn every last shred of their history and make sure nobody ever talked to them again? Why didn't we do that? It's been done in the past.
It was the benevolence of Abraham
example,
Lincoln, basically.
But a great example, I think, is Carthage. Long time ago. Whatever happened to them? Ever heard of the Carthaginians? Maybe some of you have. At one point, they were very big society. Science, culture, technology, military, all kinds of stuff. Very interesting place. You might have heard of the great General Hannibal. He was a Carthaginian. Well, one day, their little back and forth with Rome got a bit too much for Rome. And now we don't talk about Carthage anymore. It's like it didn't exist. that isn't like that out of the realm. I mean, like I brought it up before. I mean, if you were a member of the Nazi Party, they will, if you're on the loose, 105 years old, don't care. Your ass getting hauled in front of a judge, you're being tried. So it's interesting. I definitely think it's one of the reasons. Same thing with the American Revolution. The American Revolution didn't end with us executing every last. I guarantee you in the American Revolution, I have to look, I guarantee you loyalists were killed. People loyal to the crown probably were rounded up and executed. But there wasn't this sense of, now that we've declared our independence, now we must like we're a great ally with England. And War of 1812 happened, but 100 years after independence was gathered, more or less, America was on friendlier terms with England. I imagine you get there by not kidnapping English royals and executing them or weird things like that. Kind of a long answer, but when you talk about, because rioting, if you're just going to break things because you're angry, honestly, you're doing that for you. Nothing wrong with it, but you're doing it for you. You're not going to get a message across. You're just doing it for yourself to get your message across to yourself. No big deal, but it's what it is. But talking about actual like violent rising up against an authoritative government, I would say, yeah, that's the line. When one's innocent, but here's the problem, right? When you're in it, excuse me.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, people fighting in the American Revolution wouldn't have said that loyalists were innocent people. They wouldn't have deemed them innocent. Even though from our perspective, people loyal to the crown, they would not have been deemed as innocent for being against the revolution. Scary thing about revolutions, man. If you're not for the revolution, you are against it. That's how it works. So, long answer, but every riot will always be justified. Are they for the best? I would say, man, maybe sometimes, but once it teeters to extrajudicial killings, then no. I think that's when it is just objectively bad.
Okay, so I'm going to respond to these 2 super chats and then get the third that just came in. Back to my Melanated Scope super chat where he said, 4-hour standoff at Rushmore just finished. Push the Trump/Pence thing back for hours. Yeah, I'd seen a bunch of the photos and the short video clips on Twitter about it, and the guys that said, "Oh, you're on stolen land," so on and so forth. And usually I kind of brush these things off as just a proxy war against Donald Trump. Just like nobody, I don't think, really actually believed Brett Kavanaugh was the embodiment of evil and the devil himself, but the fight for his nomination was a proxy war against Donald Trump. When it comes to American Indians, though, I don't want to say I have a soft spot, because that's just, to me, there's almost like a bigotry to that of arrogance, thinking that you're higher. But I don't see how else, if I were a young American Indian who wanted to raise awareness for a cause that has festered for 150 years, okay? And not in a way where you're bringing up old arguments that are no longer relevant, but just like straight up unfulfilled contracts. Like we talked about the other day, how the Cherokee Nation, in the contract to end the war with the Cherokee Nation, the U.S. Army and the U.S. government literally promised them representation in Congress, that they would have a member in the House of Representatives. You know what I'm saying? And that was never delivered on. I don't know how, if I were a young activist fighting for better Indians' rights and a better life for my tribe and my people, I don't know how else you could get the word out there than by piggybacking on to visits to Mount Rushmore, because it is on what used to be tribally sacred Lakota land. That's actually a tough one, where I don't just instantaneously bristle and think, okay, those people are sellouts, or those people are just proxy warriors. And this piggybacks actually into the second question here, that can rioting be justified? Well, first off, it depends on what you say is rioting. Like, for example, peaceful protest that can cog up the wheels of things and can, make a stink. It sucks when you want to get through traffic and these dang protesters are making your day go longer. You know what I'm saying? But as long as they're actually not damaging the cars, they're not damaging the buildings, you have to look at it like Pence did. Ultimately, this is what I think is a really good example.
And one more super chat.
Yeah. Mike Pence, when he went in to go watch Hamilton, he was basically embarrassed and lambasted by a bunch of people on stage who made a very intellectually dishonest question of him from the stage that was fueled by a sensationalist media. But Mike Pence did something very gracious, and he said to his family members that were with him, he said, listen to this, as they were booing him. He said, listen to this. This is what freedom sounds like. And so I think the line for me where you have my attention, and I agree with you, and by the way, statistically, this has been proven. All kinds of Pew Research polls have been done about different movements that have gone from peaceful protest to being violent or have stayed peaceful. And the moment a protest goes violent, the average American stops believing in its cause. But as long as it stays peaceful, not only does the average American believe in the cause, but then begins to actually espouse its ideals and lobby on its behalf. So peaceful protest, I believe, is morally correct. And so far, as best as social science and polling data can prove, is the most scientifically correct way of actually, amongst Americans at least, getting your point across and getting more awareness and funds and movement towards your cause. But it is the kind of protest that requires the most patience. So for me, the line is, Cody talked about the line. For me, the line is, if the person you are protesting, no matter how uncomfortable you've made them, because discomfort is part of it, and sometimes to get that discomfort, you have to go through acts of civil disobedience. Okay, so read what Martin Luther King said about civil disobedience. Read what the Founding Fathers said about civil disobedience. But for me, a large part of the line, this is not a complete definition, but for me, a partial definition is, if him who you protest can look back and say from a point of discomfort, this is what freedom sounds like, then I think you are engaging in the American process of peaceful protest. And now to the final super chat. We're actually going to be ending here pretty soon, guys. If you got any more super chats, make sure you get these out of your system. I'm loving this conversation. If you've got any last questions, get those out of your system. NS Greeny super chat. Thank you very much for the $5, NS Greeny. It says, shout out to Shane Olmstead for being willing to consider his opinion shout out to Shane Olmstead for being willing to consider his opinion given a debate about rights. Truly, I appreciate the conversation in the chat. Look, awesome. So here is a perfect example of literally just what I was saying. As long as you're keeping the gloves up, generally your opponent will respect you. If not, begin to see where you are coming from, and you possibly have the chance of changing hearts and minds. And for heaven's sakes, you just got a super chatted shout out, Shane Olmstead. So kudos to you. I haven't been able to follow all the details of what your guys' argument was, but that to me is exactly what good, solid freedom sounds like. So keep up the good work. Cody, do you have anything to say before we go?
Well, I guess just the last thing I'll say on the notion, like you said, of peaceful protests. I think one of the reasons why peaceful protests do speak louder than violent protests is because, I don't know. I've always been a believer that one of the most universal, greatest signs of strength amongst humans that we all recognize is restraint. And I think when you have a bunch of people saying they're justifiably angry
can you repeat
and
that?
they're not going to smash things, that shows great restraint.
Yeah, can you repeat that first sentence? That was really profound. I like that.
I think one of the things that every human being just recognizes a show of strength amongst other humans is restraint. So a bunch of people getting together saying, we're mad as hell, we're not going to take anymore, and we're not going to break things. We could. Can't stop us. Too many of us. We could burn and loot if we wanted, but we won't.
Okay.
That's always been, that's always been, like one of the, the little parables, right? Of like the great signs of leadership, right? Like a king is a king when he stays his hand or some nonsense, right? But you know what I mean? I think we have always recognized that having the ability to do something and choosing not to is really kind of one of the greatest shows of strength. And it's one of the reasons why I think peaceful protests work better.
Yeah.
People are saying we're mad enough to step out of line and do things we shouldn't, but we won't.
Yeah.
Because we know our goals are that important.
Okay.
Like we are so steadfast in our convictions, we will restrain ourselves. That's a very powerful message always. We believe in what we believe in so much, we will restrain and control ourselves, and we won't do the things we could if we really wanted to. Always
Actually,
has
I
been.
really like that, Cody. In fact, I can tell.
That's what, by the way, like Jesus did for. I'm not trying to put Jesus over.
Cody's just putting over Jesus.
My larger point is this: you'll notice for thousands of years that's been a recurring theme, though. They're a theme of restraint when you don't necessarily have to. When you do have the power to do something, choosing not to do it. That's been a story, and I think a bunch of people marching down the street, not smashing windows, not burning cars, and a lot of protests are like that, means more because people realize in the back, hey, they know they could, and they're like, wow, they're not, though, because their message is more important.
Yeah. All right. So we got a couple of super chats here. First, EXO, $2 super chat. Thank you very much, EXO. Says, what is Yangism's place in the political discourse? Look, man, I got to tell you, if Brett Weinstein has his way, it's going to be a lot bigger. I have been seeing the Dark Horse Duo suggestion that we first talked about 48 hours ago all over my feed the past 6 to 8.
We first talked about a week ago.
A week ago. You're right. We talked about this 2 or 3 days before it became like a big thing. Other media outlets.
The same day of the podcast.
It was the same day as the podcast. Yeah, but it was weird. There was a very delayed reaction. Look, I'm trying to put us over as being avant-garde, Cody. Just let me yellow journalize and sensationalize our awesomeness, okay? Because it's not yellow journalism when I do it, okay?
So everyone feels.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that was actually a very, very significant, especially for the younger generation that doesn't listen as much to the mainstream media. Today, Dave Rubin said he felt there was a hole in the internet that's getting filled with Jordan Peterson coming back. And that's something, I know you may laugh at that.
Am I laughing? Yeah. Oh, am I laughing? Dude, they're like financially tied together. Get out of here with this nonsense.
Okay, no, I
know
they
both make money off each other. I don't want to hear it.
Okay, but still, at the end of the day, it just shows that there's an entire subculture outside of what is mainstream broadcast with its very own array of celebrities, talking heads, and influential people, okay, that I think is actually a good thing, because then they are subject to what the words that come over out of their own mouths instead of being subject to what somebody interprets about the words that came out of their mouth, which happens on the mainstream media. So what is Yangism's place in the political discourse? I think to be leaders. I think UBI is a political system and a economic system of the future. And I think individually Yang has to live up to what hopefully Brett Weinstein has said about him of being a very effective and competent leader of whatever small vineyard he's got that hopefully maybe becomes a bigger vineyard somewhere else. But he has to live up to all the aspirations that people like Brett Weinstein put into him. And then I think the universe will bless him with some kind of avenue of leadership. And the Yang Gang has to be the gang that epitomizes what is hopefully this restraint, raucous restraint, albeit, that Cody talks about. And then Emerald Miner. Oh, this is a great super chat to end on. Oh, I'm loving this, man. Cardin, I'm proposing to my girlfriend of 4 years in 2 days. Any advice on engagement/marriage? Dude, it's actually really funny you say that. I wish we had the 4th camera. Me and Brittany are actually looking at starting a dating and relationship advice podcast. For just a once-a-week podcast for fun on Saturdays, because we, believe it or not, actually get asked this question a lot. We could talk for hours, but I'll give you just a couple of quick tips. First off, kudos to you for getting married. It's almost like a luxury good now that a lot of people don't take seriously enough, but you will notice, Emerald Miner, how the world treats you differently. When you tell your boss, oh, hey, dude, I got to go. I got to take a day off for my girlfriend's graduation. He's like, dude, shut up. What's your problem? You got to stay on work. It's a girlfriend. Get out of here. Whereas if you say, hey, dude, I got to take a day off. It's my wife's graduation. Oh, yeah, that's family stuff. Yeah, dude, I get it, man. Yeah, take the day off. You know, there's going to be 1,000,001 examples like that where you just realize that the world finally views you as adulting because you've shown commitment. Now, there's some things you should do before it, though. And I'm not about to say something snarky like go out and get a prenup, all right? I did sit down with my wife and I said, here's 5 things that you got to be okay with before we get married, and you can't come back and say no to them when they come up, and make sure that things that are near and dear to your heart are on that list, bro, Seth, so that when they do come up and your wife wants to say no to it or whatever to it, or poo-poo the idea, you can say, hey, we talked about this, okay? And in mine, I believe it was actually pretty funny. In mine, one of the things was, for example, the first thing was motorcycle driving. I said, look, I know your family's not very big on motorcycles, and I didn't have one when we were dating because I'd sold my old motorcycle when I went to New York, and I hadn't purchased my new one yet. So we never really had the riding a motorcycle argument and stuff. And one of the first thing on my list was I said, look, I'm a motorcyclist. I'm going to be buying one of these things when I get some cash, and it's going to be good. And I know how your mom and dad feel about it, and maybe how you feel about it. She's like, no, I love you. I like to have motorcycles. You can go get one. And then sure enough, 2 years later, when the bike that I wanted came up and we actually had finances from a tax return in order to go buy it, she said, no, I don't want you to get it. No, it's too dangerous. And then she started going down that road, and I was like, we talked about this. You know what I'm saying? So if there's thing that you want, you got to make sure you sit down and you have that conversation that, babe, I love you. And here's 5 things we got to talk about. So when they come up, boom shakalaka, we're both ready for this. And that's something you can do. And then also pick the one you love and love the one you pick, man. That's honestly, work at it. Work at it. It's the most important relationship you will have in your life. So work at it. Anything good requires work. So if it's ever requiring work to stay together, just realize that's part of the system, and you will be rewarded, man. You will be rewarded. And I think the universe definitely rewards men who just actually take the step of making that commitment. So anyway, Cody, you got anything else you want to say?
Just a $2 super chat from Shane Olmstead said, if chat doesn't like this video, I'ma air it out. So you heard him. I didn't say it. He said you guys should like this video. And again, always, if you disagree, please dislike.
Okay. Awesome. Sweet. So, this has been real. It's been fun, and it's real fun. We'll see you guys in the next video. This is Problem Solver Politics.